Hi, this is Larry. I'm coming to you live from Wisconsin's first capital, beautiful Belmont, Wisconsin. And we're going to talk today about a super important concept at the end of Jesus' life and also in our life, the idea of God's justice. When we talk about justice, we're talking about the idea that God, when what God does is right. Another way of thinking about justice is rightness. And when we think about rightness, the whole thing about things being right comes from God. Now, the reality is, for God, His justice is always right. His justice is always perfect, just like all of God's attributes. But for us, and for the people of the first capital of Belmont, justice was never perfect. In a way, you could say that our justice is very short-sighted, short-lived, and short-armed. And I'll show you what I mean by short-armed. The famous verse in the Bible that talks about man's justice being short is in Romans 3:23, where it says, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You can take that phrase, the glory of God, and you can put God's justice in there, or God's rightness. Everybody falls way short of the glory of God. Also, that's not just a statement of saying nobody's perfect. It's true that nobody's perfect, but actually it's saying much more than that. It's saying that everybody falls short of God's glory. So let me show you what I mean by that. A lot of you probably think that I could throw this historic first capital of Wisconsin rock out towards where that tree is. You hear the truck going by in the distance. That's a historic state capitol truck driving past. So a lot of you probably think I could throw this rock out to that historic tree. But that tree, there it is, back on me. But if I have little short arms, it's a lot harder to throw a rock very far. So I'm going to throw this rock with a short arm as far as I can. And you'll see what I mean by how we fall short. Here we go. I'm not sure if you could see that, but it made it about halfway to the tree because my arms are too short. The first governor of Wisconsin is a good example of how man's justice falls short. Governor Henry Dodge was appointed by President Andrew Jackson in September 13th of 18 something or other, which is written on a card down there. Just a second. 1841. And his story is not exactly a picture-perfect story of perfect justice.
There's a situation happened right here in Southwest Wisconsin. He kind of did a little, I guess, insider trading, perhaps you'd call it. There had been an uprising involving some warriors from the Ho-Chunk Nation. The military, including Henry Dodge as a militia commander, had responded. General Henry Atkinson of the United States Army met with Ho-Chunk leaders at what's now Portage, and were upset by encroachment on their lands by the lead miners here in Southwest Wisconsin. So General Atkinson promised the U.S. government would look into their grievances, and they promised not to harm any white miners who, even if they were trespassing on their territory. Well, Henry Dodge was at that meeting, present at the negotiations, and shortly thereafter, he took a group of around 130 well-armed men 20 to 30 miles inside of Ho-Chunk territory at what is now Dodgeville, and established a stockade and mining operations there which were quite successful. According to one source I looked at, he boasted that the U.S. Army couldn't make him leave. The Indian agent at Prairie du Chien had been urging the miners to leave to reduce tensions, and then he sent a letter complaining that about Dodge particularly, starting later, I believe a few years later, when they had to go to either Portage or Prairie du Chien to receive their annuity payments. They had to meet with Indian commissioners, one of whom turned out to be Henry Dodge, which was rather unjust for the Indians. He wasn't solely responsible for the incursion into their lands, but by being a person of authority and kind of blowing off the regulations and doing it himself, he encouraged others and ended up being the one that they had to come to for helping with their complaints. Long story short.
There were a lot of shortcomings of justice in Jesus' life as well, especially as he came to the end of his life. And those are all of the events that we celebrate as part of the Passion Week and as part of Lent. But Jesus had something that allowed him to overcome all of the shortcomings of human justice, which was his trust in God as his heavenly Father. It's the power of faith. Jesus had a vision, which was faith, that saw him through all of the shortcomings that he had to face. And I have an example of that. He had vision that allowed him to see his way through all the troubles. That's what we need too, is that vision. An example of that might be what I have right here, which is this set of binoculars. We need to have a vision that doesn't look at the perspective that we're stuck in, but vision, which is faith, that sees through the circumstances and sees beyond our circumstances. The Apostle John said, "This is the victory that overcomes the world, our faith." And it's like having a set of binoculars. When I look out at the field now, I see things with a certain perspective. But if I use the binoculars and I look through the binoculars, here I can see the historic Capitol much better and through a different perspective. And that's what we need, is the perspective of faith. Let's look at a few of the places, especially in Matthew 26, the end of Jesus' life, a few places where Jesus demonstrated this amazing vision, his faith in God that saw him through the circumstances and gave him the bigger picture. In Matthew 26, there was a woman who poured out ointment at Jesus' feet. And when Jesus talked about what she had done, he said that she has done a beautiful thing. Wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told. Jesus saw, even in the midst of bad circumstances, that she had done a beautiful thing. And he spoke about the future. He said, wherever the gospel is preached, this will be talked about. When Jesus was having the Last Supper with the disciples and they poured the cup, Jesus said, "I will not drink this fruit of the vine until I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom." Again, Jesus had a vision. His faith carried him through difficult circumstances. He had a big picture of what God was doing. Also in that same chapter, Jesus said to his disciples, "After I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Jesus again had vision, faith to speak about the future. We need to have that same faith. One more example. In chapter 26, verse 64, Jesus said, "Yes, it is as you say, and in the future you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Even under intense interrogation, Jesus had a vision of the future. And we need to have that same vision of the future that God has for us. Even though we're in very difficult circumstances, let's exercise faith. This is a great time for us to have faith and to believe that God has great things that He's doing through difficulty, just like Jesus had faith and a vision in the same God that we're trusting in. So let's take hope and exercise our faith and hang on to God through all of these circumstances. This is Larry from Wisconsin's first capital, Belmont, Wisconsin.